Sheila, thank you for joining us today to talk about Dottie Flowers. Your new book is called Dottie Flowers and the European Caper. The second book in a series, I'm seeing here that there's 5 altogether that you've got planned.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one was Dottie Flowers and the Skinner Gang.
Yes.
Now, just a question, is this second book a sequel to the first book? Do you need to read the first book in order to understand the second book?
Well, you could actually pick up the second book and still be able to get a lot out of it. But, of course, as in most sequels, it's better if you have read the previous ones, you know. I think this applies to...
You get a little bit of more feel of who Dottie and Mabel are.
Yes, exactly. But
right.
You certainly don't have to have read the first one. I have read sequels or series where you say to yourself, oh, heck, I should have read that one first.
Mm-hmm.
So really, mine could be read as a standalone, but it's still better.
Yes, they're probably introduced more. Can you tell us a little bit about Dottie Flowers and Mabel Scattergood, how they met, who they are?
Yep. Well, Dottie is a real estate. She actually owns a real estate company in Mississauga. But she's originally from Montreal. She's from an English Montreal. She does not speak French.
Right.
And she's a divorcee, and she has 2 grown children who have their own children, their own family. She came to Mississauga a few years ago and you know, set herself up in business. Mabel is a widow, and she was originally from the United Kingdom. She's lived in Canada since she was a teenager. But she still has a lot of the English sayings and mannerisms and so on. Mm-hmm. And they met. What happened, Mabel loves to drive, but she's a little bit reckless at times. And Dottie was in her BMW at the traffic lights one day, and this car bumped into the back of her, and it was Mabel. And Mabel was all apologetic. Oh, dear, terribly sorry. And invited her for a cup of tea, to go back to her house for a cup of tea. Well, Dottie was so upset about the whole thing. She wasn't really thinking very clearly. But then when Mabel mentioned that her nephew had a motorbike on the driveway that he was trying to sell, Dottie thought, well, because she loves motorbikes. Right. So she decided she'd go for tea, and she did, and the motorbike wasn't to her taste. But that's how they met.
And the rest is history.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
Yeah. And they're total opposites.
Yeah, that's what I found when I was going through it. It's kind of the odd couple. Was that inspiration for you?
Well, it did occur to me, yes, absolutely. What happened was I had written my first novel, which, I'd finished and I had it edited, and now I felt I was ready to write in my voice. In other words, I almost had to get that out of the way before I was ready to write, to relax into my writing. They do, in fact, say that that's quite common, and people have to sort of almost get their first book out of the way first. That's exactly what happened with me. Anyway, I was just thinking about, I wasn't sure, what to write about, and these characters just came into my head. They just suddenly, I thought their names came into my head, and the type of people they were. I thought, oh, right, that's what I'm going to do. That's what happened with me anyway. So.
Well, they're very funny. I like the things that happen to them. I'm not sure if you're writing, it's a comedy, mystery, all at the same time. And so that's kind of, you get a bit of both.
They're called capers, the kind of book that I've written, that I'm writing, they're called capers, because there's some seriousness in them, obviously. And I mean, murder isn't exactly a comedy, but
no,
they're written in a lighter style than a regular mystery or thriller would be written.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun, and there are far more coincidences in books like that. Things happen. Right. Oh, fancy that happening.
Yeah. I'm wondering, have you been to Italy?
Oh, yes. I don't like writing about places I haven't been. My husband and I spent 2 months in Europe in 2003, and we spent 1 month in Provence and 1 month in Italy. So the the story, the second book, is based on our own, experiences, or rather what we saw there.
Right. Otherwise, did you have to do any other research?
No. No. Now, the first book, of course, is set in Mississauga, Toronto, Oakville, so, that's local, so that was straightforward. But as I say, the second one was Provence and Tuscany. No, I didn't actually, because I made notes when I was there, and it was all based on how we reacted to things. We had a little bit of an accident, and what happened to us, and how the car company helped and that type of thing.
It's a little hard to write accents in different languages. Yeah.
Well, they actually, there's a lot of thought given to the. People will say, well, they'd rather not have an accent, or somebody try to write in the dialect,
right?
So on. So what I did was I tried to. I had one character dropping her S's all over the place,
right.
But I didn't do that with everyone because it wouldn't stand out, and it wasn't necessary really. It's a bit tricky, that kind of.
I know. It would be hard. It's almost something that you have to sort of make a decision about whether you want to keep that in the story or throw it away.
Well, some people find if they're reading a book that has accents, the dialect has been put in there with all the little, accent marks and so on.
Mm-hmm.
They find it difficult to read. So, in a way, as long as you're indicating somehow that this person has a French accent in this particular case.
I know as I'm reading through it, I read it with an accent in my head.
Oh, yes. Okay.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably, for most people, that's all they need, actually. I'm just reading a book that has a Yorkshire dialect in it, and the person who's writing it is actually doing all the accents and all the, everything. It's a little bit difficult to follow. So,
I read a book like that, and I actually gave it to my dad, and he didn't last past the first chapter because it was just so hard for him to figure out.
Exactly.
But once you catch on to how they're and it's not just the accent; it's the way they say things, it's the words.
Yeah, exactly. You can get across the culture of the person, and so on in other ways. It doesn't have to be.
Oh. Anything that you learned from the first Dottie and Mabel that you were able to apply to the second book?
Yes.
Or that you thought you'd wish you'd done in the first book that you took and did in the second, or?
Well, what happened was really funny. When I wrote the first book, I ended up, my first draft was only 35,000 words. Most people, their first draft is much longer than they want it to be.
Yes, you're usually cutting stuff out.
Exactly, and I hadn't plotted the book, and I know some people plot them, some people don't, but I hadn't plotted it, and I obviously needed to do some plotting. I realized I had, so I got around it. I managed to flesh it all out, and it worked fine. So for the second book, I decided I would write out a bit of a plot, so that I wouldn't be finished so quickly, and it worked much better.
Right. And it is actually a bigger book.
It is. It is actually. You're absolutely right. So I did a sort of skeleton of the book. I didn't necessarily know how it was quite going to end, but I did more detail in the plotting. So therefore, it seemed to help me not go too quickly through.
Okay. As an author, what is your process?
Well, first of all, when I'm actually writing, I like to write for 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's my routine. I promised myself, because I started writing in earnest when I retired, but I didn't want all my time to be given to writing.
It's a hard thing to sit down and to force yourself to do. Do you find it like nerve-wracking?
It is, but you have to. when you write, you really have to be disciplined, because there are many days when things don't really work and you can't think of what.
And there must be lots of distractions, especially if you're at home.
Yes, exactly. Well, we were living in an apartment for a while there, and I was going to the local library and did my writing there. But that was a very good idea. That worked beautifully. But now we're in a different place. We're in the house, and I have my own office, so that's okay. But you do need to be in a place where you can't be distracted easily. That's for sure.
Do you storyboard it? Do you you know the ending before you know the beginning?
No. What I tend to do is I have a rough idea of what I want to happen. I get that, I write that out, and I sort of give myself a bit of an idea of how the book might go, but I let the characters lead me. Suddenly I'll think, oh, I know she could do that, and then that might take the book in a slightly different direction. So I tend to let the characters tell me rather than me tell them, and I find it works better.
And since Dottie and Mabel are kind of growing with you.
Yes, exactly.
And they're becoming, I guess they're becoming real, and they're off doing their own thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. So that's what I do. I know some people are far more organized than that, but it seems to work for me. As long
if that's what works, I think everybody has their own style. I don't think you can. There's certain things you can teach and certain things you not. It's interesting to find out what each author, how they write, what they.
It is actually. You're absolutely right. It's fascinating. But the thing is, of course, because they are the same characters, and each time I'm on my third book now, so each time, they're doing slightly different things, but they're always doing them within character, of course.
Right.
So that part of writing makes it easier if you've got the same characters from that point of view. The challenge, of course, is when you write a series, the big challenge is making sure that you tell your reader enough so that they understand what, for example, what the person looks like, what kind of person they are, and so on and so forth.
So when you take away the he said, she said, then you know who's talking and they have their own style.
That's right. But what I'm saying, though, is let's say somebody's reading book 2, they still need to know certain things about those characters in order to appreciate what's going on in the book. But when you're talking about them, you can't say, give a long backstory, because you will turn the reader off. So that's one of the challenges, is telling the reader things about the characters almost as an aside.
Oh, I see, without having to go into, entire chapter detail again, and then that would just throw people off that already know this stuff.
Yeah, well,
about them.
So, you say things like, well, Mabel knew she had to go on a diet, but she promised herself she'd go on a diet when she got home again, or something. So that's telling the reader that Mabel is a little on the plump side.
I found that it was quite simple to get a good picture of these two together and even their daily lives, what it would be like for them together. I'm surprised they haven't killed each other by now, actually.
Oh, oh yes. Well, that's right. Well, in the first book, they had a great big fight, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any favorite authors that you like to read?
Oh, gosh, lots of them. I have Ruth Rendell, P.D. James.
P.D. James, one of my favorites, too.
Yes. Very much, and Peter Robinson, who's actually from Yorkshire, but he's a Toronto writer. He lives in Toronto. I like him very much.
Peter Robinson?
He does the Inspector Banks series.
Oh, okay.
He's very good. He's well worth reading. Yes, there's lots of them. Leon. Oh dear. Right, Brunetti. Her books are set in Venice.
Right.
And I can't remember her first name.
Are these so you like reading other mystery writers?
Yes, I do, actually.
Whodunits, sort of.
Yes,
like
I do.
Yeah.
But I just finished reading a book called Cutting for Stone, and that's not a mystery in the same sense. It's more of a, I suppose in a way you'd say it was a family saga. Very powerful book. I loved it. If you Google, you'll get the author. I can't remember his name. It's
okay.
I think it's Ethiopian or an Asian name, or
I'll have a look for it.
Yeah, it's a very powerful book. Well, I'm in a book club, so one of the things I like is that we are assigned, different books to read, and that's very good, because you might read books that you normally wouldn't take out of the library, and then you're glad you did.
I have another question about your books. Did you know at the beginning that you were going to write 5 books?
I actually decided once I started writing the first one that I would like to write 3. That was, for a long time, I was going to write 3. And then I thought, this is a bit silly. 3 isn't enough. I should make it 5, because 5 is a good number for a book series, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I find sometimes authors write too many books in a series, and as a reader, you might enjoy the first, say, 3 or 4, and then after I think, this is very nice, but I think I've had enough of this character, and then you find there's a whole new more of them. That's me. That's a personal thing. So
but you can also, maybe authors do get tired of their characters as well, and maybe you can sense that when you're reading the book that's got too many.
I think that might be. It could be that they're being persuaded by the publisher to write more.
Put out more. That's possible.
I do know that, to me, 5 is a good number.
Okay. And any plans for after the series?
I try not to. I don't dwell on it, because I need to stay enthused about my Dottie and Mabel characters. Mm-hmm. I don't want to lose interest in them before I start thinking about something else. But what I'd like to do is go into something quite different. And in 2004, I found an article in the Star, and it has to do with sanatorium of all things. It's called the Western Sanatorium, and it's in Toronto, and it's still there. Now it's called the West Park, and it was actually for TB patients. And the article is quite interesting, and I thought, well, that might be a good way to write an historical novel, and maybe the main character perhaps has been up there, and
that sounds interesting.
Somebody. I haven't done anything beyond that, but I thought, to me, it sounded as if it might be a good starting point, for a book.
Well, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, so that would be, of course, totally different writing. I mean, I would have to change.
I think so.
Do a lot of research, and it would be interesting to see. That would be good for me, I think. Yeah. So that's what I have in mind.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll be waiting on that one. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you would like to offer any new writers out there as to advice? On their writing careers?
Yes, I think that it's always a good idea to go to writing workshops, if there are any courses offered in writing or any programs, because you always learn something. I definitely did that and do that still. You always learn something, apart from the fact that you're meeting other writers, but you
do learn something.
So I definitely think that's a great idea, and obviously to read a lot is a good idea. When it comes to writing, you have to discipline. We talked about that earlier, really. You have to be prepared to sit down and just write. A time, daily, every day, same time probably is better. Some days nothing happens, and that's normal. That's absolutely normal. This idea of having these brilliant moments, we all get the odd one. I've had the odd one just recently, which was, I know what I can do, and it's great when it happens, but it doesn't happen that often. Mostly it's a lot of work. And
I think that's the misconception. I think a lot of people think that an author just sits down to their CC or their wherever they write, and all kinds of magic just starts pouring out, and that's not. That's really just the absolute opposite, probably. That's
not to say you don't have moments, and I have had some, and it's a great feeling when I know what I can do there. That would be just. And people say, that was a good idea, and so you feel good. But that's not going to happen all the time by any means,
No, it's a lot of tearing out your hair, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And you can just write and that's not a bad idea to just sort of keep writing, and then perhaps the next day you can look over it and say, okay, now what can I take out of this that will be useful, and sort of just take the bit out that you want.
You remind me a lot of Anne Lamott. I've read something by her called Bird by Bird, and if she's writing, she wrote a book on writing.
Yes.
And she's saying a lot of what you're saying now. So
was that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I've actually read her book. I know, a long time.
Bird by Bird.
Yeah, long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. I read it. I've read it a couple of times. Did we leave anything out, Sheila, that you might want to just mention while we've got you?
No, actually, I don't think so. I think I've covered just about everything, and the only thing perhaps I will add is that when you've got your book ready, you need to have it edited and edited and edited over and over and over until it's as good as you can possibly make it, and that of course takes a lot of time and patience.
Yes, that must be the hard part. That must be really tough to see, even another person come in and scratch out things and change things, and then it goes back and forth. But your baby and someone else is taking it and ripping it apart.
I'm a member of a writers group, and I've been a member of a writers group for the last 12, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the very best way to improve your writing and to make sure that what you're saying makes sense. It's really more of a critique group as well. And I would highly recommend that people, if there isn't one around, that they form one. And I can give advice to people about how to do that and how to run the critique group if anyone's interested, because I really think that otherwise, you can actually think, oh, this sounds all right. It's amazing what happens when you get 4 or 5 people have now seen your chapter,
right?
And you go to the meeting and you find out, oh, it isn't as good as I thought it was.
As long as people are willing to be honest with you, and likewise, I guess, with you, with other people, then you can really learn from that. And I can imagine it would be also heart-wrenching at times to know that you worked so hard at something. And
as long as you've learned how to do constructive criticism, and the people who around you in your group also know how to do constructive criticism.
Yes, they're handling it with kid gloves.
Why you should feel awful. In other words, you don't say to somebody, "This is crap." This is
no.
You'll say something like, "Well, your opening paragraph didn't grab me," and then having said that, you would then give some suggestions as how they could perhaps improve that opening paragraph. Right? Then you might talk about the dialogue. The dialogue isn't credible. I can't see Sam saying that to George. It wouldn't be within character him saying that. Those are the sorts of things you say, which are helpful. They're not nasty. They're helpful.
Right.
People, learn. Marvelous. So yes, I highly recommend people join a writers group or a critique group, or form their own. And as I said,
or at least have somebody in their life, or a couple of people in their life that are willing to, that you trust.
Well, yes, the only problem is you have to be careful. If you've got family members doing that, they're going to be prejudiced, to like what you've written. You really need to have other people who are writers.
Right.
What you actually need. It's important that you have people who know, who are in the same business and who are able to critique.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good advice, and I'm sure there's lots of would-be writers out there that are forming groups all over the place, or through their creative writing classes, or forming groups within that.
Well, that's always a good way to do it, because towards the end of your course, you could ask the instructor, could I see if there's anyone interested in joining the group, or maybe you've already decided who you'd like to be in it, and you've asked them personally. But it's really important, and I stress that. It's absolutely hard to do without it.
We're just going to wrap up the interview right now, and I just want to thank you very much for your time. It was really, really interesting. I like talking with you. I can't wait to read more from your series.
Thank you.